Good evening everybody, Mollusk here. This is going to be a video about Beastmen in the end times. I've been meaning to do this video for a while now, and a recent comment from one of my honoured viewers has given me a bit of a kick up the arse to get it done. This could turn into a bit of a rant, who knows, so I'll just quickly lay out some ground rules first. First off, I'm a big supporter of freedom of expression. There are a lot of ideas and opinions in the world, some of them are better or worse than others, but you don't find out which they are unless you talk about them. Secondly, offence. If you expect to go through life without having your sensibilities trodden on, you're probably in for disappointment. If I or anyone else here says something that offends you, feel free to discuss it and try to find a compromise, or just leave the conversation. If someone's being a jerk, then it's there for all to see, and as far as I'm concerned, they're hoisted by their own petard. From what I've seen of the wargaming community on other people's channels, it seems to be full of thoroughly decent sorts, so I'm sure we'll get along swimmingly. To the end times then. I believe the last book, Archaon, came out recently. I haven't read it, but from what I've read of the others, I think Games Workshop have done a pretty good job. I especially enjoy that they've done the Game of Thrones style thing of killing off characters in horrible ways. Funnily enough, I think that brings the stories to life more. The merging of armies has been quite a characterising feature, and I think it makes a lot of sense from a business perspective and a gaming perspective. I know a lot of people have made videos and talks about those kind of subjects, and they're much better informed than I am, so I won't go into that any further. Except to say I think they've handled it quite well in the narrative. I mean, I didn't see the elves ever getting together, but, it was believable from what I read in the Kane book. And the new rules have spiced things up a bit. It's always interesting to see what an injection of new models and new abilities can bring to the dynamic of the game. The new magic phase and the Reign of Chaos table and goodness knows what else for the Skaven bring something a bit different to 8th edition. I've got to admit I haven't really played with them very much, because one drawback of the end times certainly is the little bit of extra bookkeeping you seem to have to do. And one other thing to say, isn't so much of a thing at the moment, but there is a certain, I think, well-founded fear that with the merging of armies and the changing of the geography of the game, there'll be a loss of attention for certain factions, which will ultimately just be phased out of the game. Thinking specifically about Beastmen now, I'm sure their merger into the Legions of Chaos didn't shock anyone, and so now we've got access to some of the nice toys the demons and the warriors have been blessed with by their toadying gods of Games Workshop. I'm certainly looking at the skull cannons and the chaos chariots as potential additions to my goat horde. And with the new rules, we've had an update to the ambushing abilities, so now we don't have to double up on units just to ambush one of them, which is how it always should have been. It's not really game breaking because you end up having to basically deploy randomly across the table if you're going to go full whack, but it's nice for the things like Ungor raiders and other cheap skirmishy units that we traditionally like to bring in from reserves. It's great to have the marks back, and I don't think they're too expensive to put on units, which is a surprise. And they seem to cover quite a lot of the traditional weaknesses. I think Khorne and Slaanesh marks deal with psychology and leadership, and Tzeentch and Nurgle deal with durability in their own ways, which, have always been the problems with the Beastmen. And we've got things like the Eye of the Gods and the Reign of Chaos, which add a bit of chaosy flavour back to the army. So in the absence of a new book, the end times rules actually, they're pretty good for Beastmen. And we might as well make the most of it, because I don't see anything else coming our way. But for all that, there is something I'd like to get off my chest. It's quite often when people find out I play Beastmen, and we're talking about people in the hobby, because other people have quite a different reaction, they tend to feel the need to apologise on Games Workshop's behalf for the shitty treatment that the Beastmen get given, but then go on to tell me about how much better the Beastmen are now in the Legions of Chaos, for all the reasons I've just mentioned before. And I'd like to ask everyone in general, why do you play your army? If it's because you absolutely must smash face with an unbeatable death machine, you're probably not one of those people that play Beastmen. And I'm guessing that most people like something about the aesthetic or the style of the army. that they spend so much time painting, organising and playing. Let's not even mention paying for. And so a big gripe I have with the end times is that there's no goat models. Even the rats have bigger horns now. And I'm aware that's the case for many other armies, but my sympathies are somewhat biased. Now I mentioned before about the variety the Legions of Chaos brings to the Beastmen army. And that is good, but you can't help but notice that most of the other units from the Warriors or Demons books do the same job as what the Beastmen do, but just do it better. And so if you're wanting to build a strong list, it's a slippery slope towards having an army with no Beastmen in it. And I sort of feel if a strong army is what you want, well, that option was always open before. You'd have just collected another army. And while I'm venting, let's talk about Marx. I'm not sure why any little Beastman thinks that the Gods of Chaos deserves his worship. If you read the stories, the best the Beastmen can hope for is a cameo role as a bleeding carpet for members of the other more important factions to walk along on their way to the more important parts of the narrative. We get gifted with war gear, like the Banner of Outrage, which just actively makes our enemies better than us. And once a desperate beast gore has hacked his way through improbable odds through the rape lords of the other factions, instead of the rewards of immortality as a demon prince. No, my goody friend, it's spawn time. I mean, that is hilarious. But to be honest, I think the Chaos Gods can sit on a Dark Elf and swivel. Okay, I've had my moment. Now, one of the questions that prompted this video was what changes would I like to see made to the army? And I've got to admit, I'm not really into wishlisting. I'm sure there's some famous saying about limitation being the mother of creativity or something like that. And I think there's definitely some truth in it. In this game at least, I like to work with what I've got rather than shaping things to suit me. The fun is in striving to be better than everyone else in a system that you don't control. And I'm also the kind of egotist that likes to try to do it with a handicap. But that's a bit of a boring answer, so I'll try to speak to changes that I'd like to see in 9th edition. So first off, I'd like to see more of a balance between the armies, but that does kind of come with a cost, in that in order to achieve it you'd need to make the mechanics behind how each army works more similar, and there's a reason why we play wargaming and not chess, in that the individuality of the force is quite important. I think I'd like to see toughness 5 Minotaurs, because they need it so hard it physically hurts me. I'd like Ungor to be usable. I know Slaneshi Raiders can be, an effective speed bump unit in a way, but they just can't do anything in an attacking sense. I mean, I wish you luck going after those war machines. The Lore of the Wild obviously needs updating. It was written for the old edition, and so doesn't have that cantrip or Primaris power, or whatever it's called, which is that little bonus whenever you successfully cast a spell. I like spells like Bray Scream and Traitor Kin, but most of the spells in it, the Lore of the Beasts just does better. Yeah, I don't think it's controversial to say it's probably the weakest lore in the game, and so just bumping it up a bit would be nice. Actually, come to think of it, the change I'd most like to see is to go back to the old Skirmishing Herd unit that was in the old Beasts of Chaos army book. That was when I was first starting to get into Beastmen, and I remember looking at it and thinking, that's just brilliant. It was so different from how anything else worked, and it just fit the style of the Beastmen so well. Don't get me wrong, it was a pain in the arse to move models, and can you imagine doing it with the model count we have in 8th edition? Yeah, the Raiders and the Unruly rules. I'd like to see something like that come back. So, in conclusion, I love Beastmen. I like the end times, and I'm looking forward to 9th edition. I'm kind of resigned to the fact that the Beastmen are going to get phased out in the 9th or coming editions, but I'll keep playing them as long as I can. I don't intend to ever collect a new army, but with 9th coming out, you never know. And if I don't like it, I'm more than happy to stick with 8th, or even try out the Beasts of Chaos edition, now that I've got myself all nostalgic. But yeah, that's probably enough of my voice for any of you strange souls who are still listening, and I thank you for watching.